The Cliff Gray car will go from third. The flag flies and we get underway here for the Tony Gaze Trophy, and it looks like it's a great start really from all three on the front row. How will they unveil as we go into turn one? And it is the pole sitter who holds on to the lead for the time being. It's Cliff Gray who's managed to jump Jonathan Abacassis up into second spot. So the Frazer Nash getting the better of the Austin Healey, but it's the Jaguar that leads them all the way from the line. All fairly clean so far, jostling in the back four position, but so far so good as the number 20 car really looking a little bit out of shape there at some stage.
Bobby Verdenroe was in the lead. He's fallen back third, fourth, fifth, sixth. He's had a problem yesterday in practice, and he's dropping out of the race as they get down to Ford Water. So the driver who started from second on the grid is now leading. That's Jonathan Abacassis in the Austin Healey 100. Oh, running quite right. Number 35, Tim Crichton, driven Frazer Nash there, gets it right for the second part of St Mary's. But for Bobby Verdenroe, problems, and also for car number 51, that is not going well. That's Michael Hibbert, who started from the pit lane in the buckler. That's not going very far at any speed whatsoever. Yeah,
Jonathan Abacassis in the end, after a bit of a slow start, really managed to carve his way through the field and hit the front very quickly indeed. Such a shame for Bobby Verdenroe. We are on board with one of the...
this is Pat Blakeney-Edwards, who started from sixth on the grid. Car number 2 pressing on, and his rear-facing camera shows the cars dwindling in the background as he's gaining speed and picking his way up the order. I think by the end of the opening lap he'll be up into maybe fourth place. Let's take a look. Down into Woodcote they go. We can see Jonathan Abacassis still leading their Austin Healey 100 at the front field, but side by side action in behind in the battle for third place. And Pat Blakeney-Edwards, I think it is, diving through. Yeah, that's 28. That's
Frazer Nash.
Frazer Nash. John Yaw
making his way through the chicane, trying to get right up onto the back, and then we go to the battle just behind that, and that is Patrick Blakeney-Edwards.
Just need to correct myself, it was Olivier Marseille who moved up into third place there in that battle ahead of John Yaw. Jonathan Abacassis, though, leading by just a whisker over a second from Cliff Gray, who started so well from the outside of the front row in the less regular-looking Frazer Nash Le Mans replica, number 32. There he is with a Union flag-style helmet, and in the background being pushed very hard by Olivier Marseille, who's got more speed as they work their way down around the back part of the circuit. And it's still very busy because in behind, the dark red version of John Yaw is looking for a moment. And are they going to go on both sides of Cliff Gray? Not just yet.
Oh, and the number 28 there on John Yaw, putting a wheel on the grass there, getting very edgy and pulling off by the looks of things, with trouble already. Michael Hibbert in the buckler. Sadly, it looks like his day well and truly done, and a lot of smoke pouring out the back of that exhaust for the Porsche 356. That's the Tom Peed Porsche, which started the row behind its sister, and that is at a bit of damage on the car in front as well. The cream car just in front has picked up a bit of debris on the front grille, it looks like, but this car smoking, it doesn't look like in a good way.
No, but the sister 356 started a row in front. Robert Barry pressing on very hard, being pushed by the Morgan's +4 of Richard Thorne. Great historic races, and again, fabulous footage. We look forward from the driver in sixth place, Pat Blakeney-Edwards, all over the tail of, well, not quite onto the tail, but he will be through the chicane of Paul Mortimer in that red and white Austin Healey 104. You go a little bit wide over the curbs, you don't get the power down, and that is exactly what was the case for in that situation. And then driving on the grass and having a marker board, that's definitely slows you down somewhat. That's a 166, and
the Austin
unfortunate, one of the 3 Austin Healeys in the race, one of the 4 Austin Healeys in the race. And there's Bobby Verdenroe still going around, but clearly our pole starter has had big problems. 12th at the end of the opening lap, and there is a replay. Very lucky that Bobby Verdenroe didn't get that join him, and he backed right off as it rejoined the circuit, crisscrossed, took a liking to the daffodils, but hopefully didn't hit anything other than the marker board. That was a big moment.
Yes, well, that was the car that I thought I saw had picked up a bit of debris. Nicholas English at the wheel of that 166, and there he is, rather rallying around this Goodwood Motor Circuit, and well, fairly good job to keep it out of the tyre barriers there, with the marking board across the front grille, but he manages to regain control, and there he is back on track just behind the Morgan in front at the moment. But up front, it's Jonathan Abacassis that still leads in the number 20 car. That is the Austin Healey, and he's got a 2.7 second gap ahead of the number 32 with Gray at the wheel, the Frazer Nash. So starting to eke out that gap now. The battle's happening further back in the midfield. Frazer Nash is, to be precise, John Yaw and Cliff Gray fighting it out still. Cliff Gray a little bit further back, actually, I think, in that number 32 car.
Behind, we already saw him put a wheel on the grass at St Mary's. John Ure has got both of his left-hand wheels on the grass coming into... Oh, it's only Woodcote. There's only a tyre barrier right in front. He's somehow collected it before he got to the chicane, but he's clearly got problems. He's going to be joined very, very soon by the Austin Healey and Mortimer, and tucked in behind Pat Blakeney-Edwards in this mid-green car with the onboard camera. Let's have a look as they go down towards Madrick. It's such a tricky corner, and when you have the rear shot of a car in front, you can really see how it's handling. They've got a back marker on the outside of the circuit. That's half their cornering possibilities. And hand up, well done, says Pat Blakeney-Edwards. Thank you very much indeed for staying out of our way, because I've got a battle on here. I'm aiming for 5th place and higher.
He certainly has. He's following the number 45, Austin Healey, of Paul Mortimer, who was just up in front. But Pat Blakeney-Edwards gets so close in that final chicane as well. Every time I think he's going to hit the wall, and the smoke continues though to pour out of the back of the number 6 Porsche 356, Tom Peed. He's been going around with that smoking exhaust for the last few laps. Well, you can see his face doesn't look too perturbed by that, but certainly kicking up the fog behind him too. Back on board with Pat Blakeney-Edwards, who is very close now to the back of Mortimer, and takes the inside line. Two very different lines. The Austin Healey's going to have the much wider entry. That's really going to compromise Edwards, but he's managed to hold a little bit of speed, carry it through, try and get on the back, use momentum, use a bit of slipstream. How close can he get?
Well, better acceleration from the Austin Healey in front, but wait until you get to the braking area for Woodcote. Now it looks like the Jowett Jupiter might have had a problem there. The pale blue car, yeah, it's leaking various liquids from underneath, and that hopefully will not be making anything slippery on the track, and it will return to the pits. Richard Gain, so unfortunate for him there.
Yeah, that car from 1953 there, and still the smoke pours from Tom Peed, who's down in 12th at the moment, and I think he's been given, yes he has, a black and orange flag. So that means you've got to come in and fix your problem. And clearly a leaky exhaust that might well turn into oil, you never know, coming down to the circuit, and that won't be good for anybody on track 2. So that Porsche will be having to come into the pit. So not the race that Tom Peed wanted from his Porsche. Jonathan Abacasas leads just by 5 seconds.
Just by 5, and in fact the last lap was his best lap. It was under 1 minute 40. That's very impressive for cars of this age. Now is traffic going to have a role to play? Number 45, Paul Mortimer, just losing a little bit of ground there. In fact, he's fallen back several places. Pat Blakeney-Edwards was behind him at the start of the lap, has moved through. Has Tim Crichton gone past as well? Look, Tim in car number 35, one of the many Frazer Nash Le Mans reps. Let's take a look. Number 2 has been pushed hard by Pat Blakeney-Edwards, getting sideways into the drop after on the exit of St Mary's, and he carries so much speed. He's now starting to catch the 2 cars in front. John Ure, who put his 2 wheels on the grass as he got down to Woodcote last time around, and Pat Blakeney-Edwards constantly adjusting the steering, moving his body a little bit in the car. Now riding on board with him, we call it a straight, but you may just spot there's a little bit of a kink to the left, but it doesn't feel so kinked indeed for the drivers, because the power is flat down, and Pat Blakeney-Edwards was pressing on, but the driver leading this race, sitting comfortably out front, Jonathan Abacasas, smooth, neat and tidy. So we've had a change at VA Marseille. Cliff Gray chopping and changing that in that battle for 2nd place, and I don't think we've got to the end of that one yet. We've still got more than half the race remaining.
Yep, the 2 Frazer Nashes battling hard for 2nd and 3rd in this race at the moment. We saw Pat Blakeney-Edwards a little earlier on absolutely scooting past Mortimer in the Austin Healey. Here is that battle though for 2nd and 3rd. Gray in the leading Frazer Nash, really trying to fight and keep that position from the 28 Frazer Nash as well of John Ure.
Well, we've lost Olivier Marseille from that. He's tumbling down the order, hadn't crossed the start-finish line, and so that's why Gray in 32 is up into 2nd place in the less regular-looking Frazer Nash Le Mans replica. But John Ure, who is tucked in behind the dark red version, car number 28, and he's got Pat Blakeney-Edwards behind it. Yes, another Frazer Nash Le Mans replica.
They are certainly giving us some excellent action as well, but there is John Ure making his way past Gray, who is falling back a little bit in that number 32, so room to find. Now he's coming under pressure from Pat Blakeney-Edwards, who's had some brilliant couple of laps. He's really carving his way through the fields. They've dropped the Austin Healey, the 45 of Mortimer, who was placated in 5th. Blakeney-Edwards just in front in 4th. Then it's this battle here, really. Blakeney-Edwards, Ure and Gray all fighting over 2nd, 3rd and 4th. And while they fight, that just allows Jonathan Abacasas to extend his lead. 6.5 seconds the gap now. But here we go, the slight kink to the left as we ride on board with Pat Blakeney-Edwards, looking at the back of John Ure and Cliff Gray, the leading car in this trio. they all hold fort for the time being.
Yeah, John Yore running a little bit wide at the kink. He's up front. They've got a back marker to try and dispose of as they get through the first part of Woodcote. That's done. That stays nicely out of the way. But Pat Blakeney-Edwards, we're riding with his car, is so good through St Mary's, and that gives him a real chance as they come down. Sharp intake for breath.
Every lap.
Emanuele Pirro came up with a great phrase for why he suddenly found time when he was driving cars around. He said, "It was the moment I discovered the chicane wasn't made of concrete anymore."
Well, Pat Blakeney-Edwards has had me on tenterhooks because every lap he has done that, really. John Yore now makes his way up into second place, though, displacing Gray, and Yore in the 28 on an absolute mission at the moment. The 32 car, here he is, Cliff Gray, falling down to third, trying to get back that position, but well, he's going to have to look at his rear-view mirror because he's falling back into the hands of Pat Blakeney-Edwards. And unfortunately, I don't think he really has a mirror, so we can't even look at that.
Great scrapping. I wouldn't even mind if this was for 10th place. This is for second place, and they're starting to lose sight of the race leader. 6.5 seconds clear. Jonathan Abacassis in the number 20, the red Austin Healey 100 with the two broad white stripes up its nose. But here is the point at which Pat Blakeney-Edwards is so good. Going through St Mary's, they've been through the first part, the second part, through the compression, now trying to settle the cars as they turn into the first part of Lavant. You can afford to run a little bit wide, but look at the adjustment to the steering wheel. Cliff Gray in front, really working hard. But what we're starting to see is John Yore in the dark red car at the front in that second place is just starting to edge clear. But again and again, as the cars go down to Woodcote, the gap gets compressed.
You can hear Blakeney-Edwards' throttle application as well as he makes his way through the corner. Absolutely brilliant to listen to. As we see the Tom P Porsche did come in after being black and orange flagged. Have a look at the rear of that car where the engine is, and the exhaust blowing a lot of smoke around this circuit, so he has had to come in, unfortunately, for Tom Pete, so that might be race done, we shall see. But continuing to fight out front, it's still Jonathan Abacassis who leads by 6.5 seconds, and then, no, this is the real battle here. John Yore in second, but it's these two, old Cliff Gray and Blakeney-Edwards, the 32 car leading, desperately trying to hold on.
What normally happens when you get one or two cars fighting, or two or three cars fighting, they slow each other down. But what has happened just there, they've closed the gap to the race leader. Jonathan Abacassis was 6.5 seconds clear. Back markers might have had a role to play in it, but they're only 3.8 seconds down. Here is the order. In second place, the dark red Frazer Nash. You can see two cars ahead of Pat Blakeney-Edwards, and that's John Yore, and in between is Cliff Gray. They go past an Aston Martin 431. That's one of the DB2s. Nicely stays out of the way. Up to St Mary's they go. This is where Pat Blakeney-Edwards is so super strong. They turn to the right, they turn to the left. Now another car up front. Here's the moment for Pat Blakeney-Edwards. Cliff Gray very marginally delayed. Oh, it's super close. Do not interlock wheels, gentlemen. As they go through the dip, up to Lavant they go. Who's going to be later on the brakes? Well, on this occasion it's Cliff Gray, but is that the right thing to do? Is it better to turn in, get the turn in right, and then get the power down as soon as you can? I think Pat Blakeney-Edwards has been very wise there.
Yeah, it allowed Blakeney-Edwards to almost get the undercut, to get a much tighter line here, but that's allowed them to close right onto the back of Cliff Gray, and they're both catching John Yore here. Are they both going to get him? John Yore in the red car, which is at the front of this trio, moves to the inside. That's going to allow the number 32 of Cliff Gray to sweep round the outside. Can he hold it in? Not quite. Has to tuck back in. You can just see how hard he's working at the steering wheel. Holds firm for now. Through the chicane they go to start another lap. How are we doing for time? 6.5 minutes. So still a way to go yet before this battle over second, third and fourth is done.
From my point of view, there's not enough time. I want far more than the 6.5 more minutes. But Cliff Gray is fabulous on the brakes. But John Yore, using all his years, and in fact, let's be honest, decades of experience, just knows where to place that number 28 to hold on into second place. But Pat Blakeney-Edwards is still surely looking up the road. Is there another slower car that we get a lap? Can I find an advantage? He nearly did it last time. We had another Aston Martin to be picked off. But at St Mary's, don't forget, he and Cliff Gray almost interlocked wheels last time. So sharp intake of breath. The Aston Martin is deposed. First part of St Mary coming up. Cliff Gray, as per normal, brakes a little later. Carried the speed, carried the momentum. Let's see how they set up for the second part of St Mary's. It's actually far steeper than it appears on television, don't forget. So there's really quite a drop as they go out of the corner. And then coming up to possibly the key corner of the circuit, Lavant.
Here we go then. John Yore managing to make use of the traffic there, that Aston Martin, to give him a little bit of space, and this is where you can really see Pat Blakeney-Edwards battling with the steering wheel and the throttle to try and keep hold of that number 32, Frazer Nash, battling to get in front of John Yore, and Pat Blakeney-Edwards just behind as well in his Frazer Nash 2.
Now, I mentioned not long ago that the gap had almost been halved between Jonathan Abacassis leading in the number 20 Austin Healey. It came from 6.5 seconds down to 3.9. It was traffic affected. That, and as he's got the traffic behind him now, and he's opened it out to 5.6 seconds, maybe even more, as John Yore comes through in second place, now with a tiny bit of breathing space over Gray. But the leader's gone through just now. He's in behind the Jaguar XK120, dives up the inside, so certainly taking no prisoners there. Jonathan Abacassis, what's the gap? Well, it's stabilised. It's almost exactly the same, 5.5 seconds.
Pat Blakeney-Edwards making his way through initially, but now that has actually allowed Cliff Gray to come back at him. So there was a slight change of a third there, but now Gray managing to get back in front and hold that position. And you can see Blakeney-Edwards trying for all his might, dipping a wheel onto the grass ever so slightly, tucking back in. The traffic gets out of the way nicely, trying to follow that slipstream as much as he can. Who is better on the brakes? He needs to be a little bit closer, and all the while they are still keeping Abacassis within bay. It's 5.5 seconds, but really it's going to be a tough one to try and catch him up without any mistakes. But 4 minutes on the clock to go, and he's desperately trying to get by his Blakeney-Edwards. Well,
Cliff Gray was way too deep turning into St Mary's, managed to just about haul the car back across the right-hand side of the circuit for the second part. And again, you see so much adjustment to the steering wheel between the first part of lap and now they're getting into the second part. Both these Frazer Nashes being driven a little more sideways than is ideal. And up in front in second place, John Yore in car number 28, much smoother. Hasn't got the pressure, and he's driving so well in second.
Absolutely. Well, there is Jonathan Abacassis scoots into out of the camera view, and away he goes. 5.4 seconds the gap after 9 laps, 3.5 minutes still to run. John Yore in second, and this brilliant battle between Cliff Gray and Pat Blakeney-Edwards continues to rage on, and at the moment it's John Yore with advantage in second over this trio, but the two Frazer Nashes hot on his heels.
I thought there was a slight mistake possibly from Pat Blakeney-Edwards. He dropped back a little bit down the Lavant straight, but Cliff Gray lives to fight another day in that third position. Now they're closing onto the tail of John Yore. So just as soon as you think John Yore's escaping, they come back at him. Oh, Yore running very wide. The second part of Madrick negotiates that.
He certainly does. So you're quite right, Bruce. As soon as you think one starts to get away, suddenly they're back in the thick of the battle again. There is no rest. I think John Yore just be hoping he can scoot away with this, but no. Cliff Gray now right onto the back of him because Pat Blakeney-Edwards seems to have fallen back a little bit. So now, can Cliff Gray try and find a way through to get up into second? John Yore seems to be a little bit under pressure, but that's running out wide there for Cliff Gray. Falling back now into the hands of Pat Blakeney-Edwards. Fantastic.
You know, I think there it wasn't Patrick Blakeney dropping backs. It was Cliff Gray getting his tail up and really starting to close in. Maybe he's got a bit more tyre life at this stage in the race. You've only got 2 more minutes. Just take the rubber off them. That's the way to go. But Pat Blakeney-Edwards will still be looking in number 2, see if he can get on the podium. It won't be the first time by any stretch of the imagination for him here at Goodwood, either here in the members' meeting or at the revival. But Cliff Gray, he has been fabulous on the brakes, and here we have him going through the kink on the Lavant straight down towards Woodcote. He's not only on the inside line, but he will probably brake later than John Yore. John's been great in defence, but is there half a gap? No, he hasn't decided to offer half a gap. But don't forget, Cliff Gray later on the brakes, closes in a little bit, but still in third position. Pat Blakeney-Edwards, he's sniffing something out here. Is it a podium position?
Who knows how this order will end at the moment. It's John Yore up in second, Cliff Gray in third, and Pat Blakeney-Edwards in fourth. How many more laps do we think they'll get?
I think it's going to be super close whether this is the last lap, because it's a 20-minute race, or if our race leader Jonathan Abacassis got through just in time with enough of a margin to go round. His best lap in the race, 1 minute 39.1. His last lap at 1 minute 40 flat, so he's super consistent. But we'll keep an eye out on that one. I think he may have just squeaked on to do this lap and one further one. Let's wait and see. But either way, he's got a very tidy lead to defend. 4.5 seconds, and in behind me, finally had to change. Cliff Gray motors past John Yore, and then who else fancies to go? Well, that'll be Pat Blakeney-Edwards.
Well, he certainly wanted to have a go, but then John Yore just came across and shut that gap down. But finally, John Yore succumbs to Cliff Gray, who manages to get through, just biding his time and doing it when it mattered most. But now John Yore has to focus on holding on to that final podium spot. We're looking at John Yore on board with Pat Blakeney-Edwards, who wants to be desperately rewarded with a podium for all of his hard work wrestling this Frazer Nash throughout this 20-minute race. He's right onto the back of John Yore. Can he try and find a way through? Confirmation that this is the final lap. The traffic gets nicely out of the way, and Cliff Gray skates off into the distance. Who is going to get that final podium spot?
Now, what you'll experience here, and Pat Blakeney-Edwards is looking towards, is he wants to dive up the inside, but John Yaw doesn't leave an inside option. And our race leader suddenly has been compromised. The 356 Porsche, he's about to lap it. It surely doesn't quite hold him up. I thought it might delay him, his 4-second gap. That's a bit of a comfortable cushion, but if there was a mistake, if the 356 had got sideways, he could have been gobbled up. But Cliff Gray looks so he's got out of the chicane in second place. John Yaw tucked in behind Robert, and Pat Blakeney was having a look. So 3 cars, second, third, fourth.